Good evening. Let us begin where most of us have lived and wept, where some of us still sit. You have called, perhaps with tears, perhaps in the middle of the night when the house is quiet and the fear is loud, and you have felt no answer. And if we are honest, you see, that feeling can harden. It can become a crust of discouragement, a quiet wound behind the smile, a private verdict. Prayer does not work for me. I know that feeling. I have no spiritual pride in saying it. I know where I am, and I know just where I am not yet. And I have known that ache. Now then, let us sit together and look at it without condemnation, without calling it failure. We must never use the words right and wrong about prayer. There are states and stages of consciousness. In one stage, the most natural impulse is to ask, to reach outward with words, with desires, with plans we would like approved. There is no shame in that. It is a stage, and most of us pass through it. But watch out. When we measure prayer by the appearance of things, we are measuring the ocean by the bucket we bring to it. In other words, we are judging prayer by effects while overlooking the cause. And then we say, nothing happened, when what we missed was contact. Now let us be clear. The trouble is not that God is absent. Never, never, never. The earth is full of the presence, and the presence is not sometimes here and sometimes away on a journey. But to human sense, the presence is of no avail without awareness. Omnipresence must become contact. What have we done? We have often prayed for effects, for the bill to be paid, for the body to be fixed, for the person to behave, and then we called the silence no answer. We forgot that prayer is not a shopping list. It is the restoration of conscious union with the cause from which all harmonies flow as law. But isn't prayer asking, you say? As a stage, yes. As a definition, no. We will, before we are through, take that very word ask and lift it where it belongs. But for now, hold this. Human need is not denied, it is reseated. It is given its lawful place as that which is added, not that which leads. The aim of our work tonight is not to get better at persuading God, not to outline a more eloquent case. It is to learn the prayer that returns us to presence, the wordless communion in which the click of contact is felt, and then, without taking thought, life begins to arrange itself quietly, normally, in season. If we can agree to let prayer be measured by contact rather than by things, we will already have loosened the bandage around that quiet wound, and the healing will have begun. Now then, how did we get to this habit of measuring prayer by effects? There are states and stages of consciousness. We must never use the words right and wrong about these stages. They are simply where we find ourselves at a given hour, and we work from there. In the first stage, the material sense, life appears as a series of outer conditions, and supply seems to be out there, in a job, in a market, in a person's favor. So naturally, prayer at that level is an attempt to move pieces on the outer board. We want God to hurry the postman, to change a laboratory report, to send a buyer to our shop. That is not sin. It is simply the level of sight at which we are living when we begin. It feels natural because our attention is outward and our safety seems to hang on forms. Then there is the mental stage, and some of us graduate into that with great enthusiasm. We learn concentration, affirmation, visualization, mental law. And for a season, it can appear to outperform mere hoping. We exchange pleading with the sky for posture in the mind. And sometimes we see changes, and then we say, "Ah, now I have found the secret." But watch out. I am speaking now from the standpoint of the infinite way. Mental power may shape appearances, but it still keeps us at the drawing board of effects. We are still the architect, still the shaper, still the one who must hold thought against thought. And so, we are still tired. There is no real Sabbath in that, no peace that passeth understanding, for the burden is still on me and my thinking. And then there is the spiritual sense, not an attainment to boast of, but a yielding, not a new tool, but the letting go of tools. Here we discover that being is present, that life is its own law and its own fulfillment, and prayer ceases to be manipulation and becomes communion. We do not try to move appearances. We rest in presence until presence reveals itself. And then the needed forms appear of themselves, lawfully, in their time. You see the mechanism now of disappointment in the earlier stages. When prayer is a request, the mind sets a clock. It watches the telephone. It studies the face of a loved one for change. It checks the mailbox, the bank book, the thermometer. And then it pronounces the verdict. Nothing happened. But the mind was not looking where the answer lives. It sought a change in form instead of a change in consciousness. And so it could not recognize the answer even if it were standing at the door. Let us be clear again. Omnipresence is not the same as availability. God is everywhere, but God is of no avail to human sense until God is realized. Availability is realized through contact in consciousness, through that click, that inner assurance that does not need evidence to certify itself. Before that contact, even if a check arrives, fear will ask, "What about next month?" After that contact, even if the outer scene is still in transit, peace shines and guidance begins to move us rightly. So do not condemn the petitionary stage. Never, never, never. It is where most of us begin, and it is taught us to turn, even if we turned with a list. But know why it fails to give the answer we really seek. It keeps the one praying as a separated self, appealing to a distant power. And separation is the only vacuum in the universe. If this is so, then our next task is plain. We must look at what petition secretly says about the nature of God, how it turns spirit into a distributor of objects, and why that very implication bars the door to communion. We will take that up now. Let us look at this plainly, and yet without a trace of condemnation. What would you tell God that God does not already know? You see, when you and I go to the infinite with a shopping list, money for this week, health for this organ, companionship in this form, a decision to go our way, we are, without meaning to, setting up an image of deity as a kind of celestial clerk. Now then, do not hear this as blame. We must never use the words right and wrong about stages. We are exposing the underlying premise so that we may be free of its hypnosis. Ask yourself, what could you ask from omniscience as if omniscience were unaware, or withholding, or needing your briefing on the case? The moment the mind approaches God with, "Send me this," it has already assumed that God is not here as this very sufficiency. It has assumed absence. And in that assumption of absence there is fear, there is distance, there is the subtle insult which says, "You have it, I do not, please share." That is the unconscious theology of petition. It turns spirit into a distributor of objects, a Santa Claus, a heavenly merchant who doles out packages to good children and delays them for the naughty. Watch out. I am speaking now from the standpoint of the infinite way. That image not only dishonors reality, it seals the very separation we are seeking to dissolve. The issue is not that God will not give. Never, never, never. There is no withholding in infinity. The issue is that the request itself begins on the human side of the veil, on the premise of lack, and so all it can feel is its own premise echoing back. In other words, the prayer asks the dream to correct itself, and then wonders why it keeps waking in the same bed. We are not punished for asking. We are simply confined by the consciousness from which we ask. As long as supply is imagined as a packet to be shipped, health as a commodity to be delivered, companionship as a body to be assigned, we remain at the counter of effects, and effects cannot confer themselves. God is spirit. God is a law as well as love. Therefore, divine action is not caprice, not miracle in the sense of a special intervention for a specially worded plea. What appears as healing, as supply, as harmony, is the lawful outforming of realized presence. When consciousness yields, when that inner click of contact dissolves the sense of a me apart from God, then the order which is already present shows forth as right ideas, right unfoldment, right activity. To human sense, it may look like a check arriving, a door opening, a body quickened. To spiritual sense, it is only God being God where we are. If this is so, then prayer must be of the Spirit. If God is not a warehouse, but life itself, if God is not a fixer of our outlines, but the very animating reality, then we cannot approach with a list and expect communion. We must learn what it is to be still without an object, to let gratitude and love rise without a reason, to rest from telling infinity how to appear. That, you see, is the next step, what communion actually is and how contact is made. Now then, let us say it plainly so there is no confusion left to hide in. Prayer is not a speech to God. Prayer is the means of contact with God. Prayer is not persuading an ear in the sky. Prayer is the restoration of awareness of that which is here. In the language of the Master, it is worship in spirit and in truth. You see, when we pray as talking, we remain in the arena of our own words and wishes. When we pray as listening, we cross from selfhood into presence. Prayer, in its purest sense, is a state, not a sentence. It is inner receptivity, not verbal artistry. And I will go further. The highest prayer is wordless. Never, never, never is it necessary to inform infinity. It is necessary to be still enough for infinity to inform you. What does it feel like? Not many thoughts, not many words. Sometimes no words at all. Only a settling, a quietude, as if the surface winds were ceasing and a deeper movement were becoming audible. At first, you may only notice the absence of hurry, the fading of the clock tick in the mind, a loosening of the fist around outcomes. Then, if you do not reach for a result, there is a softening in the chest, a warmth, a hush that is not sleepy but alert, as if a presence were here and you are acknowledging, yes, I feel it. Often there is that little click, that shift from me to we, and with it an assurance that requires no evidence to certify itself. It is not emotion, it is awareness. It is not visioning objects, it is awakening to being. Measured how? By peace, by rightness, by a sense of safety that does not depend on the next turn of events. Here is the practical pivot. Instead of, Father, give me, begin, quietly, honestly. Father, reveal thyself. Not as a magic sentence to repeat, not as a technique to get better things, but as the surrender of the whole bargaining posture. Reveal thyself. I seek nothing but thee. Thy grace is my sufficiency. If you are tempted to add an outline, stop there and rest. Let love and gratitude arise without an object. Let the desire for effects fall back into its proper place, as that which is added after presence is realized. Do not confuse this with passivity. Receptivity is the highest activity, because it is the only activity that does not work against itself. In receptivity, you cease the noisy sketching of how life must look, and you make room for divine impartation to register as idea, direction, courage, correction, or the simple peace that becomes your law for the next step. This is Sabbath in its spiritual meaning, the rest in which God works. Out of such rest, action becomes accurate, speech becomes timely. The email you send, the phone call you do not make, the walk you take, these are no longer guesses, they are unfoldments. To human sense, the harmony that follows seems miraculous. To spiritual sense, it is only order revealing itself where the clutter of outlining has been set aside. If prayer is contact, you ask, what then of ask and it shall be given you? Of what things soever ye desire, when ye pray, believe. We will take those very words and lift them out of the market of effects into the sanctuary of spirit, so that ask no longer means briefing God on your needs, but seeking the kingdom, and then, lawfully, without taking thought, the things are added. Let us look at that together next. Now then, let us take the very sentence around which so many sincere hearts have built an entire prayer life. Ask, and it shall be given you. And again, what things soever ye desire when ye pray, believe that ye receive them, and ye shall have them. If you isolate those lines, you can quite naturally imagine that Jesus was giving us a formula for getting objects. Ask for the house, for the health, for the money, for the person, and get your believing strong enough to import them. But watch out. The same teacher, without changing pulpits, says, "Take no thought for your life, what ye shall eat, what ye shall drink, wherewithal ye shall be clothed." And again, "Seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all these things shall be added unto you." Now, he could not contradict himself. Never, never, never. The voice that says, "Take no thought," cannot in the next breath be instructing you how to think frantically about things. What then does ask mean? I am speaking now from the standpoint of the infinite way. Ask is not a shopping list. Ask is a turning within for light. Ask for what? For the revelation of the Father within, for illumination, for the kingdom, not for the furniture of the kingdom. Ask means, open me, Father, to thy presence, reveal thyself, grant me spiritual understanding. You see how that harmonizes the passages. Take no thought removes anxious outlining. Seek the kingdom assigns the true object of desire, and ask becomes the consent of your consciousness to be taught from within. And believe that ye receive? Do not push that into a mental gymnastic. Receive is receptivity. Believe is the quiet confidence that comes of contact. To receive is not to get a parcel shipped from afar. It is to let the ever-present good dawn in awareness as reality. It is the inner yes to what already is. When that click of contact comes, you have received in the only place that matters, consciousness, and, without taking thought, the forms appear as lawful additions. Ideas arrive, right activity unfolds, timing aligns. To human sense, it will look as if you got something. To spiritual sense, it was revealed. Do you see then why argument over verses will not feed you? Scripture is not a box of magic phrases, it is a ladder of consciousness. If you stay at the level where ask means tell God your plan, you will remain with your plan and your fear. Move up one rung. Let ask mean, Father, reveal thyself. Let seek mean, turn from objects to presence. Let receive mean, be still enough for impartation. Then added takes care of itself under law. This is why our work is not to perfect petition, but to establish contact and make it stable. The text has given us our orders. Take no thought. Seek the kingdom. Ask for light. Receive by yielding. We will not try to tell infinity how to appear. That great mistake is outlining, and we will look at it closely. But first, let us consent to the discipline that holds us in this posture long enough for revelation to register. Be faithful to that, and you will find the scriptures are not promises to the mind, but descriptions of what unfolds when presence is consciously realized. Now then, let us come straight to it. Outlining is the great mistake. What is outlining? It is the impulse in us to draw a blueprint for God, specifying the person, the amount, the timeline, the method. Let John be the one to call. Let it be 500 by Friday. Let the lab report read thus. Let the buyer come from that firm. Let the healing come by this treatment. You see, it is turning prayer into an architectural plan for effects, with God hired as a contractor to execute it. Watch out. I am speaking now from the standpoint of the infinite way. The moment you move from reveal thyself to do it this way, you have slipped from spirit back to the human level and have begun to measure the infinite by the tape of your present knowing. We must never use the words right and wrong about this. There are states and stages of consciousness. Outlining feels comforting in a certain stage because the human mind fears the unknown and imagines that control is faith. It says, if I can name the channel and the day, I am believing. But that is not faith, that is management. That is anxiety dressed in religious language. Faith is consent to be led by an intelligence you cannot predict. Control is the refusal to be led. And while you hold the outline, the ear of the heart is stuffed. You cannot hear the still, small impartation because you are listening for footsteps you have ordered to arrive on your porch. Never, never, never. There can be no exception to this rule. Outlining keeps prayer on the human plane. It binds you to the level of effect and makes you a foreman over forms. And then you judge the validity of prayer by whether your plan came off, thereby measuring spirit by personal sense. If it does not come off, you say, no answer. If it does come off, you are no safer, for now you must protect the form you ordered, and fear enters by the back door. In my experience of this work, over and over and over again, the marvels have appeared only when the outline was laid down. An individual prays for a certain employer to hire them, and nothing moves. They drop the name and the date, turn within in silence, and an idea rises. Update that skill, call that forgotten friend, take that small assignment without regard to status. They follow, and the door that opens is not the door they drew. It is better, cleaner, fitting their nature in a way they could not have imagined from the standpoint of need. Another prays for a sum to arrive by mail. Nothing. The outline dissolves, contact is made, and instead of a check, a correction comes to a wasteful habit, a simplification of life, a quiet courage to make a candid request where it belongs. Supply appears as a new order, not merely as money. And then, yes, money flows as part of that order. Do you see, then, the real issue? The aim is not to secure my right outcome, but to let right unfoldment appear. Outlining is insistence. Prayer is consent. Outlining is telling infinity how to be infinite. Prayer is yielding to infinity being infinite where I am. When we stop outlining, we are not left empty. We are freed for a new mechanism of prayer. Quiet acknowledgement, gratitude, and love without an object. The very stance that makes the soul porous to revelation. And from that, lawfully, without taking thought, the forms that belong to your life appear, often beyond anything the old outline could have borne to hope. Now then, let us bring this down to the simplest inner act you can make at any hour of day or night. There is no other way to open the soul to the flow of God except through gratitude and love. But I am not speaking of gratitude because you got something, or love because a wish was met. Never, never, never. That kind of gratitude keeps your eye on the package and not on the presence, and so it leaves you measuring God by outcomes. I am speaking of spiritual gratitude, the honoring of God for what God is: perfection, presence, grace, law, before and without a single shred of outward evidence to appease the senses. You see the distinction. Object-based gratitude says, "Thank you for the check," and tomorrow trembles, "Will there be another?" Spiritual gratitude says, "Father, I thank thee for thy being. Thou art the life of me," with or without a check. And in that very acknowledgement, a different universe is contacted. One keeps you in the market, bargaining and fearing. The other takes you out of the market, into the sanctuary, where you discover that supply is not a shipment, but an order of life. And that order begins to show itself as ideas, right timing, unplanned helps, and yes, money when money belongs. How then do we practice? Simply, gently, right where you are. First, acknowledge omnipresence. Not as a sentence to repeat like a charm, but as an honest turning. Thou art here. Then acknowledge that the place whereon thou standest is holy ground, not because a circumstance is pleasing, but because presence is what fills all space. Now be still. Do not reach. Do not plan. Do not rehearse your needs. Let gratitude rise, without an object and without words if possible. Let it be the warmth of consent. Yes, Father. If a sentence moves in you, let it be this and no more. Reveal thyself. Then rest again. If thoughts try to outline, smile at them and lay them down. Watch out. I am speaking now from the standpoint of the infinite way. This is not a technique to get things. This is worship in spirit and in truth. Why does this change experience? Because gratitude and love dissolve resistance. They end the argument with life, the inner protest that says, reality should look differently before I will trust. In that cessation of argument, consciousness becomes non-abrasive, receptive, attuned. And when attunement is there, inspiration can be recognized. Right activity can be felt as an inner nudge. Provision can be seen where before there was only complaint. The same street reveals a person to call. The same desk yields a neglected idea. The same body, met without fear, relaxes into the law of life that heals. Do not call this magical. God is a law as well as love. When you cease dictating, the law can operate as you, through you, as what looks to human sense like harmony. The refrigerator, if you like such language, will always be full. Not by tricks, but by order. Your life brought into its right relations by the rhythm of presence realized. Now I can hear the modern heart say, I tried silence and nothing happened. We must speak of that because the bareness that precedes impartation often wears the mask of nothing, and many have turned back at that doorway. So let us go on and look at what this nothing really is and how contact matures if you do not outline your way out of the very stillness that would reveal God. Now then, let us meet that place honestly. You sit down to be still. You set aside the words, and after a minute or two, it feels like a blank wall. Nothing. A bareness. And the mind says, there you are. God is not speaking to me. Watch out. I am speaking now from the standpoint of the infinite way. That bareness is not the absence of God. It is the beginning of the absence of you, of the familiar noise that has filled the room so completely that presence could not be heard. There are states and stages of consciousness. In the early stages, silence first reveals not music, but the clatter we have been carrying. When the orchestra stops, you hear the hum of the lights. Do not mistake the hum for emptiness. It is only what was always there, now being noticed so it can be quieted. This is the law of unfoldment. When you cease using prayer to manipulate conditions, the props begin to fall away. The mind that said, "Get me this, fix that, hurry them," runs out of assignments, and in that pause, it accuses you of failure. Be patient. The field must lie fallow before the new crop can take. Winter is not a curse, it is a law. If, in that season, you rush back to outlining, you interrupt the very clearing that would make impartation possible. If, instead, you keep returning, gently, without strain, to receptivity and objectless gratitude, the inner weather changes. The winds die down, the waters clear. How do you continue? Not by pleading, not by pushing at the silence, but by knocking at the door of your own consciousness. Again and again, a simple acknowledgement. Thou art here, and then rest. If a sentence arises, let it be this and no more. Father, reveal thyself. If boredom presents itself, treat it as a passing weather, no more personal than a cloud. If tears come, let them wash without commentary. Never, never, never judge the hour. Your fidelity is the prayer. Your compliance is the invitation. God is a law as well as love, and law never withholds itself from a prepared place. What marks the crossing? Not fireworks, not visions to boast of, but a click, a soft assurance, a sense of being accompanied. Often it is a loosening in the chest, a breath that goes all the way down, a rightness that does not depend on tomorrow's mail. From that, practical guidance emerges of itself. An idea occurs, not as a demand, but as a fitness. Call this one now. Put that paper in order. Take a walk. Say no here. Apologize there. You will notice the difference. It carries no strain. It is not your outline dressed up. It is a quiet leading that, when followed, opens the next right piece without fanfare. Let me give you, briefly, 2 instances, not as bragging, but as witness to principle. A man, harried by debt, came to me after months of mental outlining had exhausted him. He consented to 15 minutes twice a day of bare acknowledgement and gratitude without an object. For a week, nothing. On the 8th day, in the midst of that so-called nothing, an old client's name surfaced, Not the big rescue he had pictured, just a small account. He called, did the work, and inside that work another contact arose, and within 90 days his affairs were not only solvent, but ordered. No miracle to God, only law unfolding through ideas once the outline was dropped. A mother sat in fear for a son far from home. Her prayer had been, change him, protect him, bring him here. We set all that down and turned to reveal thyself. For days it felt empty. Then the click. No picture, only the sense, he too is within God. The next action was not control, but a letter without one demand, only love. From that, a conversation opened that had been closed for years, and the needed helps assembled without one push from her. You see, the seeming emptiness was the clearing. Contact matured because she persisted without outlining. In a moment we will look more closely at such demonstrations, how harmony shows itself as lawful effect when communion, not petition, is the heart of prayer, so that your trust may be strengthened not by argument, but by the living of it. Now then, let's sit here and watch the pattern itself and not be captivated by any glamour around it. Over and over and over again, when contact is made, the outer picture adjusts, not as a prize for good asking, but as the simple appearing of order. A woman came determined to have a particular house. The outline was exact. That street, that price, that date. Nothing moved. We took our hands off it, sat in the silence, and let reveal thyself be the only desire. For a week there was only quiet and a loosening around the idea of my house. Then, in the calm, an idea arrived. Not a realtor's name, but clear the closets where you are. No magic in that. She did it. In the clearing, a neighbor visited, saw the peace she was making with her present life, and mentioned a small place not on the market, walking distance from her work, lighter to carry, more fitting to her actual need. It unfolded without bargaining. You see the principle? Contact revealed fitness, and fitness drew the form. God is a law as well as love. The law of right place could not operate while demand was dictating an address. Another, weakened by a long strain, asked for vigor, as if vigor were a package. We set down the package and turned to presence. For days, only stillness and a kind of honesty about the wear of fear. Then the click, and with it no fireworks, only a nudge to take a short walk after breakfast and to stop reading alarming reports late at night. You may say, that is too small to be God. Watch out. I am speaking now from the standpoint of the infinite way. What followed was strength returning by law. Sleep deepened, appetite steadied, and within weeks the body answered a new rhythm established from within. To human sense, it looks like better habits. To spiritual sense, it is order revealing itself, because resistance fell. Supply? A craftsman out of work wanted this firm to call. They did not. The outline was dismissed, and we stayed with gratitude without an object, until peace took the edge off fear. In that clarity, he saw a neglected tool in his shop, and fashioned a sample on a whim that was no whim. He took it to a small market he had never considered dignified, and within a month, he had more orders than his old single channel ever yielded. No miracle to God, only the law of ideas providing themselves when mind is not clutching at names and dates. Let me touch a relationship, and I will do it without moralizing. A couple sat splitting the air with prayers to change the other. We stopped all that. Reveal thyself in me became the shared practice. For a time it was only bareness and the ancient wish to be right. Then an impartation. One found the courage to apologize without scoring. The other discovered a quiet impulse to listen without defense. From there, two lawful possibilities opened: true reconciliation, not truce, or a peaceful release without enemies. In this case, reconciliation appeared. But hear me, the harmony was not a reward. It was the form that fit the revealed order of their being. In another case, the release is the harmony. Presence, not preference, decides, and when presence is realized, no one loses. Do you catch the thread? The outer is not commanded, it complies. The click of contact, the wordless assurance, and then ideas, right timing, right activity, the daily bread, appear under law. If this is lawful, then we can dare a simple practice tonight that does not return us to petition or outline, but trains consciousness to consent to God. Let us make that utterly plain and workable, so you can sit down for 15 minutes and let the real answer to prayer be lived. Now then, let us make this utterly simple so you can do it this very day, and do it without turning back to the old habit. Take 15 minutes, not long. Sit where you will not be interrupted. No posture is magic. Comfort that allows alertness is enough. We are not going to inform God. We are going to cultivate receptivity to God. First, acknowledge God's allness and omnipresence. Quietly, honestly, Thou art here. Not as a slogan, but as recognition. The place whereon Thou standest is holy ground, because presence fills all space. Let that settle. If the mind asks, "What of my problem?" answer only with this: God is. Then be still. Second, drop the list. Consciously lay down every desire, every name, every date, every figure. Say within, if needed, I release all outlines. Do not bargain. Do not promise. Let the mind feel bare of requests. Never, never, never take this moment to smuggle in a shopping list wrapped in pious words. Third, rest in quiet receptivity. No words if possible. If a cue helps, let it be brief and then fall back into silence. Father, reveal Thyself. Or, Thy grace is sufficient. Or, the kingdom is within. One sentence, not as an incantation, but as a door you open. And then you stop pushing the door and let the air come in. Fourth, allow gratitude and love to arise without an object. Not, thank you for this or that. Simply honor God for God. Presence, law, life itself. Let warmth rise in the chest if it will. If nothing warms, do not force. Consent is gratitude. Rest in a quiet yes. Fifth, listen for impartation rather than signs. You are not watching for omens. You are letting a click of assurance register, or a right nudge, or a peace that requires no proof. If nothing comes, do not call it failure. You have prepared the ground. The law operates in prepared ground. Now about the rebound. The mind will try to reintroduce the problem, the bill, the test, the person. Do not fight. Do not argue. Gently refuse authority and return to acknowledgement. Thou art here. If it returns 100 times, return 101. There are states and stages of consciousness. Patience is fidelity, not delay. How do you measure success? Not by a changed outer picture in 15 minutes, but by contact. a shift from agitation to poise, from grip to openness, from fear to a quiet rightness. That is the root. From that root, right decisions, right timing, right provision grow as lawful fruit, often through very natural ideas that appear in the hours that follow. Practice this once or twice daily. Keep it simple. Do not improve it with more words. Watch out. I am speaking now from the standpoint of the infinite way. Go to God only for God. As you do, you will discover that the whole question of unanswered prayer loses its teeth. Because prayer was never meant to be a list. It was meant to be contact. And when presence is primary, what belongs to your life is added, without your telling infinity how to appear. Now then, let us bring the whole of this into one clear, quiet word. God is not withholding. Never, never, never. Spirit does not ration itself in parcels to the worthy and starve the unworthy. The ache of lack is not in God. It is in our sense of separation. And that sense is dissolved not by louder pleading, but by contact, by the restored awareness of presence that has never been absent. You see why we have insisted that prayer is not for effects. Prayer is for God. Make contact primary, and the so-called answers come forth as the lawful addition of order, as naturally as dawn fills a room when you open the shade. Watch out. I am speaking now from the standpoint of the infinite way. Go to God only for God. Never again lift your mind to God with a single desire for effects. Do not tell infinity how to appear. Do not outline amounts, channels, persons, dates. Consent to be led. Let the things that belong to your life be added in the measure and manner of law, not the fever and timetable of fear. When you ask for things, you miss the one thing: contact. When you are in contact, the heart finds its peace before a single figure changes on the paper. And from that peace, right activity and rightful form unfold without strain. Now do not be ashamed to be where you are. There are states and stages of consciousness. If you find yourself still tempted to bargain, do not scold yourself. Acknowledge it and begin again. Begin where you are, yet do not stop where you are. I have no spiritual pride about this work. I know where I am, and I know where I am not yet. The way forward for us all is the same. Purify desire until only God is desired. Practice receptivity, and let gratitude and love without an object make the soul porous to impartation. So here is our closing invitation, simple and verifiable. Tonight, and for the week ahead, give yourself those 15 minutes. No lists, no outline, only acknowledgement, silence, and objectless gratitude. Do not watch for signs. Watch for the click of communion, the soft assurance that needs no proof. Then go about your day without taking thought, and simply observe how life rearranges itself quietly. Ideas arising at the needed hour, timing that fits, provision that comes as right activity instead of windfall anxiety. Call none of it miracle. Call it law. God as law as well as love, operating where contact has been made. And if you should waver, return to the one refrain that will not fail you. Father, reveal thyself. That is the prayer, the worship in spirit and in truth. Make presence primary and stop outlining. Then, under the government of that presence realized, all that belongs to you is added, lawfully, gently, sufficiently, without your telling infinity how to appear.